Hello, everyone. I wanted to talk a little bit not only about and not so much about particularly this week's material, but what we'll be doing in the third part of the course here. If you look at the main menu or you look at the syllabus or the course schedule, you'll see that this last part of the course, the last 4 weeks of the course, having to do with surveillance, social media, and then interveillance. You can think of this last part of the course as being a whole, I think, or alternatively, you can think of it as being really two parts. Week 7 and 8 about surveillance, digital surveillance, and then week 9 about the effects of social media and some more effects of social media. But in week 10, we bring it back to the idea of surveillance by looking at a very famous episode of Black Mirror having to do with interveillance. That is the type of surveillance that social media, especially in some of its forms, allows for. So yes, you can either think of this last part of the course as being one unit having to do with digital surveillance and its surprising forms, or you can think of it as being in two parts. The first part about just generally about digital surveillance, and the second part about being about social media and its potential effects on us. But I think of it as a whole, even though it does have this sort of two-part structure, but that's not really that important. I mean, whatever connections you see there are fine. So we start out in the first week just looking at the general phenomenon, I think, of digital surveillance. And I think that I've focused on something, this is a little old, about the Amazon recognition program, but there are others. This one here, this is all a little old, actually. The company, I forget the company that scours the web for pictures and allows for, what year is this? It's 2020, so it's not that old. I don't know. Clearview AI. I mean, I don't know if this is still, I haven't checked on it recently, but certainly this company may not still be around in its whatever form, but something similar is certainly in the works. Just the general phenomenon, I guess, this week of how just exponentially more powerful surveillance technology is once we, cross over into digital surveillance for fairly obvious reasons. That is, the capacity to surveil and monitor human beings has never been greater in the history of the species. It's just, there's no question about that. If we look at the government surveillance programs, especially in totalitarian states, I suppose the most obvious example is Soviet Russia, especially under Stalin, and East Germany, and probably other totalitarian states. We look back on those massive surveillance programs, and they seem almost quaint in comparison to the capacity to surveil people now, given cameras, databases, digital databases, and then now, of course, with cell phones and other things. It's just a massive increase in the power, the potential for surveillance, and something that really should awaken the Jonas thesis in terms of being a warning. So really, this week is just an introduction to that. What we'll see in week 8 is, again, this is a little old, a couple years old, but some, the prime example, global example of a government employing digital technology to its fullest extent to both surveil its general population, but then to focus on a particular ethnic minority. And I'm talking about the persecution of the Uyghurs in China, which is really a pioneer use of digital technology to surveil, oppress, um, and perhaps worse treatment of a portion of the population. So just, I mean, I don't want to get, yeah, I mean, what do you mean I don't want to get political? Of course, it's a political issue. It's an issue of freedom and human rights and the threat to it that digital technology poses potentially. I don't mean to single out China. It's just that China is at the forefront of this. There are American programs, European programs, obviously, other Asian programs, different governments that, where governments have used digital technology to surveil their people. But I don't think there's anything as massive as the investment that the Chinese government has made. So it's the most salient example, but certainly not the only one in the use of a government, use by a government of digital technology to surveil and to control its people. And in the case of the Uyghurs, worse than that. And then we move into, after looking at these two weeks of just really generally about digital surveillance, we move into social media, which I regard to be a related topic. First part is really looking at some of the effects, possible effects of social media on our sense of well-being. But then moving in week 10, as I said before, back to the possibilities for surveillance that social media provides, and this new idea of interveillance, which I think is very well um, portrayed in I would regard it now as a classic Black Mirror episode, Nosedive, which is, I think, a great TV show, film, short film, however you want to put it, but also connects up so closely with this idea of this new idea of interveillance, this sort of decentralized surveillance that doesn't require the kind of centralized Chinese-style massive central governmental investment and control. It's a horizontal rather than a vertical one. It's actually quite interesting and terrifying. So just an introduction not only to what we're going to be doing in week 7, but connecting it up with the last part of the course as a whole.